have something under this business, and I did take a few notes so I don't get off track. And if you excuse me if I read some of this, but the gist of this is I attended the meeting last night of the planning board, and I was actually asked by them to publicly address the city council, and that's what I'm doing here. And it's actually regarding the planning board's desire to work with us and to be included in decisions that ultimately involve them. This actually was spearheaded by the fact that they were being asked to adhere to a contract that they knew nothing about until last night. There was actually a vibrant discussion on the contract, the terms of the contract, and other terms that appear on our agenda tonight. And they actually use terms and they were often feel that they were asked at the 11th hour to make recommendations to us. And they would like to be timely informed, so I'm asking the staff if they could timely inform them based upon what they're saying. And I agree that this would actually work both ways, because as we found out tonight, based on our own agenda, we had notations on a couple of items indicating the planning board would be discussing it last night. One item was not even on their agenda, and as it turns out, as we found out tonight, that one of the items was tabled indefinitely. So we didn't have recommendations from the planning board on two of the items. I do value the planning board's recommendations, as we all should value it. And I agree that we do need to have more of an open communication between the city council and the planning board and the staff, between all of us. And I think the main problem is when they have discussions, or when we have discussions that involve demolitions and acquisitions, they feel that that is part of their purview to act upon that, and asked if we could consider having some joint sessions with them in regarding some of these items. All they want, what I want, and what we should want is to have our local government to run smoother. And I'm sure you all can agree that the line of communication between us can improve. And I'm just asking for everyone's consideration on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mayor?
What? Yes.
Yeah, we actually had a chance at staff to talk a little bit today about some of these issues. And the issue in particular that Councilor Dubois was talking about involved the Franklin property issue, in that I think the planning board felt that they should have been involved a little bit earlier in the discussions about the land use zoning change that was required, the land use ordinance change that was required to allow that property to be subdivided. And I think our feeling at staff when we talked about that is, yeah, there's some truth to that. Part of the difficulty that we run into is that, and it goes both for this and also sometimes for some of these land acquisition disposition issues, is that when the council's been very involved in something, as you were by necessity in the Franklin negotiations, by the time we need to figure out how to proceed, we really need to work with you to get direction. If it had been left up to us, we'd have gone to the planning board as Gil came to you originally, and we would not have grandfathered all those people in. But we came to you, had a workshop. You very clearly said, no, 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 that's not what we understood, that's not what we want. So please make so that all these people are legal, which we then went back and did. If we had gone to the planning board, I don't know if we'd gotten the same reaction. They may have said the approach that was originally proposed was fine. So then we go ahead and work with them. Then we come to you. Then you tell us no. So there's always this tension between who do we go to first. If we're looking at getting rid of a piece of property, I'm not going to go ask the planning board for permission to get rid of that piece of property until I know that the council would likely be at least interested in hearing their opinion about it. So I'm going to come to you folks first and say, we got this piece of property, we want to dispose of it, what do you think? If you say no, that stops it right there. If If you say yes, then I go to the planning board, then the planning board has a tendency to say, well, we're just a rubber stamp because you've already talked to the council about it. So it's an awkward process. I think we probably could have handled the Franklin thing a little bit better by having maybe a workshop with them immediately after the first workshop we had with you, and we talked some earlier today about that. But there are times when I'm not going to go to the planning board before I come to the council, because I'm not going to waste everybody's time if I know it's not going to fly. And I'm not sure that the planning board understands that dynamic. And at times, I'm not sure that the planning board totally understands what its role is, or has a different conception of what its role is than maybe I do, or some members of the council do. You know, like this current land issue, where they're very concerned about where the money's coming from. That's not the planning board's function. Their function is, should we or shouldn't we own a piece of property? Should we buy it, or should we dispose of a piece of property we have? They shouldn't worry about the price. They shouldn't worry about where the money's going to come from. They should look at it from the point of view of overall city planning. How does it fit into where we're trying to take the city? What's our vision of the area? And the issue of finances comes down to the council. So I think there's a lot of misunderstandings on both sides in terms of the role of the planning board. I think we can do, in some instances, maybe a better job of informally communicating with them some of this stuff, and a little bit sooner than we did in this instance, particularly with the Franklin land thing. But there's constant tension there. They want to know. They want to be able to know that their recommendation is coming to a tabula rasa, to a council that knows nothing about it. I'm not going to go to them and ask them for a recommendation if I don't have some indication from the council that you're at least interested in it. So just to put that out there for something to think about.
Council, Lachance.
A couple brief points, and thanks, Ed, you semi-answered several of them, but I don't know what any of them were. But your discussion is very valuable. I appreciate it. Is there anything in the city's documentation that really describes in clear detail the function and authority and duties of the planning board? What it does not do and what it does do, because it seems there's a little bit of a communication problem, and it's not necessarily the planning board's problem all the time. It's coming from other ends too. So something I've observed in the last few years is a little bit of an air of brushing off a lot of these boards and committees, and I take them very seriously, be it the planning board or the finance committee or any other committee that we have. If any one of us is on a board, we're putting in time and effort, just like the appointed board members are. And I believe they take their job very seriously. So what I hear is it really rubs them the wrong way when their perception is they don't really matter. They're just spinning their wheels. It doesn't matter what they do anyway. The council's going to vote however they vote. It would help to know for all of us on boards and committees what the real function of that board or committee is, what we do have the authority over, what we don't have the authority over, what's appropriate, what is none of our business in a particular board. So that might go a long ways to head off future problems. And also, as you said, I mean, there are things that staff can do to diffuse the bombs before they blow up in a meeting. But I've seen a lot of disrespect in an offhanded way to a number of boards and committees, and I think those members take their job seriously, and we owe it to them to hold them in high respect. When we get a recommendation up or down, we really should consider it. And that can be difficult at times, but what you talked about, Ed, did help, and I appreciate that. But that's just what I see.
And I agree with a lot of what you say, but I will also point out, and here I'm talking from my staff's point, the planning board is not very nice to my staff. Correct?
I will contest to that from last night. They were very rude.
And I think so that if we want to talk about standards of conduct,
Testy.
if I have a staff member that's rude to somebody, I need to know about it, and I will talk to them about it. But we do have a situation where the staff gets beat up, they get accused of, the ones who don't live in town, of not caring and really hoping that they make bad recommendations that hurt this community because it will help theirs. Now, that is really out of line. If I thought anybody on my staff, regardless of where they lived, was making recommendations that they knew in their heart were against the best interests of the city of Lewiston, they would not be employed here. And if anybody on the planning board has proof of that, they need to come forward and tell me. So it's a two-way street. I'm sorry I got wound up.
And thanks. That's heartfelt. And what you mentioned before, if we do have some kind of board description, duties, responsibilities, where the authorities stop, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, as far as what they're really discussing, for planning board, finance committee, any other boards like that. I think I've looked in the past for some different descriptions, and it has not been easy to find. So that might go a long way in the future to lay the ground rules for what these boards do and
I
don't.
passed out the section of the zoning and land use code dealing with the planning board, and it does do a lot of that. The difficulty is that, as in many things in life, it's at a relatively high level. So when it comes down to, for example, the land issue that we're dealing with, the board shall review and make recommendation to the city council with regard to acquisition, except through tax lien foreclosure, and disposition of all public ways, lands, buildings, and other municipal facilities. That sounds straightforward enough, but it does not really provide a context for that. Is their recommendation supposed to be based on their consideration of the comprehensive plan,
Okay, we can do that.
of the future vision for the community, or is it supposed to be based on the price or where the funds are coming from? So I think that part of the problem is that things are described, but they're described in general ways, subject to interpretations and subject to getting into all kinds of things. And who's to say, when it comes right down to it, based on what it says there's nothing there that says that they shouldn't consider price. So that's part of the problem. Maybe a review and a revision of some of this would help. Maybe some clarification in terms of more detailed policy could help. Might be something that we could use as a starting point for some discussion of some of these issues.
Thanks.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, we've had this discussion about purview of committees. I think ever since I've been a counselor, I think every term there's been some discussion because one group or the other is disagreeing. So put that aside, because I think you're right. If it isn't clear, then maybe it is time to do a quick revision, and with input from the planning board and other committees, you know, the council could make some changes. I just want to support what you said, though. In the end, it doesn't matter. We can disagree with the planning board, they can disagree with us, but when staff is presenting at a public meeting, there's just absolutely no excuse for treating staff in a way that none of us would want to be treated by anybody. So I would expect that staff would never tolerate that, and if they're ever put in that position, well, I'll let you tell them what they should do. But.
Unfortunately, sometimes we get paid, just as you get paid the big bucks to be kicked around by people, we get paid the big bucks to be kicked around.
You get paid bigger bucks. So.
Bigger bucks, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
On that, motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Oh, we got a motion.
Session.
Oh, I want to go home.
Just one.
Okay. It's here someplace.
I was going to make a motion for Tylenol after the pay-as-you-throw discussion.
Thank you.
Do what?
Second.
Oh, motion to adjourn to
I
go
was
into
making fun.
executive session. Let's see why we're going into executive session, though.
Economic development, I think.
I don't even know what I did with my agenda.
MRSA Title I, Section 4056C.
Thank you. Second it.
Second.